In the beginning, there was darkness, and then, bang, giving birth to an endless expanding existence of time, space.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not.
Another somewhat surprising theological statement from the head of the Catholic Church to report on. It now appears Pope Francis is open to the theories of evolution and the Big Bang. He told a Vatican audience that neither idea conflicts with the idea of creation. He also said, quote, "God is not a magician with a magic wand."
In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
The great mystery at the heart of the Big Bang is to explain how an entire, fantastically enormous universe of space and energy can materialize out of nothing.
And God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness.
It's the moment when everything we see, all 100 billion galaxies, each of which contains 100 billion stars, all of that material was compressed in a region which was infinitely small.
The singularity is a point where gravity is so intense that even space and time begin to break down, like the Big Bang or the black hole.
The singularity problem, actually a set of problems. The singularity, of course, that's the point where the universe was all together in a single point. That's the singularity, because you have infinite density, infinite temperature, and zero space. That's what a singularity is. Well, the existence of a singularity is a bit bothersome, because usually in physics, those of you, if you ever do any physics, if you're solving a physics problem and you end up with an infinity, it usually means you did something wrong.
On the basis of Big Bang cosmology theory, the Bicep 2 collaboration assumes that the universe spontaneously sprang into existence from nothing, or from a point possessing infinite density, infinite pressure, and infinite hotness, called a singularity, although nothing and singularity are actually indistinguishable from one another, since a point has no volume and thereby incapable of possessing density, pressure, and hotness, let alone infinities thereof.
We don't know why it banged. We don't know what banged. We don't know how it's banging.
So no known physics can describe the conditions in the singularity. And so Big Bang supporters have to just assume that the Big Bang is possible.
They assume an inflationary epoch in some Big Bang expanding universe,
where gravity is so intense that even space and time begin to break down.
The flatness problem mentioned in a lot of textbooks. The flatness problem has to do with the expansion rate of the universe versus the force of gravity. You see, it turns out expansion tends to make the universe bigger. Gravity would want to stop that expansion and make it smaller, because gravity is an attractive force once you pull things together.
Like the Big Bang or the black hole. Like the Big Bang or the black hole.
Does it make sense? It's an arbitrary assumption. There's no explanation for it. It's a problem. Given that it has all these difficulties, why do people believe it? And that's a question that I've pondered quite a bit, because I'm an astrophysicist and I certainly don't buy into it.
Physicists use the term entropy to describe the amount of chaos in a system. Entropy in the universe is always increasing. In physics and in life, things naturally go from order to disorder. Turning entropy into order requires energy, just like when Eric had to expend energy to restore order to his house.
Because what happens during an irreversible process is that we're increasing the entropy or the dispersal of that system. And it just doesn't move back, and that'll become really important as we talk about the next few videos. And so the second law of thermodynamics says that in an isolated system, or a closed system isolated from the universe, entropy never decreases. In other words, our delta S is always going to be positive. In other words, matter and energy are going to become dispersed over time. In other words, randomness increases over time. Now you might think to yourself, I know that's not true because I see stuff out there that's not random. In other words, I see trees and cars and DNA, and I know these things have a high amount of order.
But what is information? Well, it seems to be fundamentally about order. The order of molecules in your DNA contain the information needed to make you.
It is the order of zeros and ones streaming through the internet that contain all the information required to play this video. It is the order of letters that makes a word and the order of words that makes a sentence that carries information. So fundamentally, information seems to be about order.
Well, you're not violating the second law of thermodynamics because remember, we're talking about an isolated system. And so we can decrease entropy in an isolated system, but as we do that, we're increasing entropy of the surroundings or the universe.
The second law of thermodynamics states that entropy in the universe increases with time. Or in other words, things don't stir themselves apart. But if entropy is going up, that means the information in our universe is constantly increasing. So where is this new information coming from?
One of the iron laws of physics is the second law of thermodynamics, which says that everything rusts, everything decays, falls apart. We're all made out of atoms, and these atoms in turn obey the second law of thermodynamics.
Explosions usually do not bring about order. All observed explosions tend to destroy and disintegrate order. Now, if we were to find a very detailed order as a result of an explosion, it would only be logical to conclude that there was an intelligent intervention behind this explosion.
Is there any order coming out of a big explosion? I would say not in any way. Explosions cause chaos and random distribution of various parts that were there perhaps as a united organisation beforehand. Any explosion renders that completely null and void. There is no evidence to my mind that an explosion or even the Big Bang Theory can ultimately produce organised beings like ourselves or any other animal.
Forms of energy are destined to degrade and fall apart. To move from order to disorder.
Bang was more than just a creation of matter. It was a creation of the universe, which means a creation of space and time.
Now you might think to yourself, I know that's not true because I see stuff out there that's not random. In other words, I see trees and cars and DNA, and I know these things have a high amount of order.
Creating time, space, and everything is a pretty neat trick.
Evolutionary thinking is applied to most areas of science. The field of evolutionary cosmology proposes that the universe is the result of a random explosion some 15 to 18 billion years ago. There are no examples that I've ever seen where an explosion produced an increase in order. Explosions are destructive. They cause spontaneous degeneration, not spontaneous generation.
Anything and everything in the universe has the tendency to go from order to disorder. And once the damage is done, it's extremely difficult to reverse things and unmix them. It's a process known as entropy.
What we see in cosmology is this. Everything we see, things are running down. Stars are burning up their fuel. Once in a while, a star will explode and goes from order to disorder very quickly. But the only thing we see in the universe today is the universe is running down. It's deteriorating. It's going from order to disorder.
If I mix coffee, I realize that when I put cream into coffee, I increase entropy, I increase disorder. In fact, to see this milk jump out and reform in this cup is such a preposterous event that you would have to wait longer than the lifetime of the universe to see it happen.
Now, the second law allows you to increase in order, like a baby growing into adulthood or seed into a tree, but if and only if you have an outside energy source and a harnessing mechanism to capture that energy.
Scientists recognize that all known explosions decrease order and structure and increase chaos. The idea that the cosmos evolved also violates the second law of thermodynamics, known as entropy. The second law states that as time advances, the universe becomes less ordered. Over time, all systems left on their own proceed in a direction from order to disorder.
The second law of thermodynamics is an unremitting force. Nothing is immune to the power of entropy.
The true nature of information would first be hinted at thanks to a strange problem, one dreamed up by a brilliant Scottish physicist who appeared to be thinking about something else entirely. James Clerk Maxwell was one of the great minds of the 19th century. Among his many interests, Maxwell became fascinated by the science of thermodynamics. Maxwell was one of the first to understand that heat is really just the motion of molecules. The hotter something is, the faster its molecules are moving. This idea would lead Maxwell to dream up a very bizarre thought experiment in which information played a crucial role. Maxwell theorized that simply by knowing what's going on inside a box full of air, it would be possible to make one half hotter and the other half colder. Think of it like building an oven next to a fridge without using any energy. It sounds crazy, but Maxwell's argument was extremely persuasive. It goes like this. Imagine a small demon perched on top of the box who has such excellent eyesight that he can observe accurately the motion of all the molecules of air inside the box. Now, crucially, he's in control of a partition that divides the box into two halves. Every time he sees a fast-moving molecule approaching the partition from the right-hand side, he opens it up, allowing it through to the left. And every time he sees a slow-moving molecule approaching the partition from the left, he opens it up, allowing the molecule through to the right. Now, you can see what's going to happen. Over time, all the fast-moving hot molecules will accumulate on the left-hand side of the box, and all the slow-moving cold molecules on the right. Crucially, the demon has done this sorting with nothing more than information about the motion of the molecules.
But what is information? Well, it seems to be fundamentally about order.
Maxwell's demon seemed to say that just by having information about the molecules, you could create order from disorder. This idea flew in the face of 19th century thinking. The science of thermodynamics had shown very clearly that over time, the entropy of the universe, its disorder, would always increase. Things were destined to fall apart. But the demon seemed to suggest that you could put things back together without using any energy at all. Just by using information, you could create order. Remember, it seemed like the demon could use information to create order in a box of air that started out completely disordered. Moreover, it could do this without expending any effort. Information seemed to be able to break the laws of physics. Well, that's not true. It can't.
Mystery at the heart of the Big Bang is to explain how an entire fantastically enormous universe of space and energy can materialize out of nothing.
Well, that's not true. It can't.
One of the most amazing realizations of the 20th century was that quantum mechanics, combined with relativity, allows something to come from nothing.
Maxwell's demon seemed to say that just by having information about the molecules, you could create order from disorder.
In fact, nothing is unstable. Science has made it possible that the universe didn't need God, that God is redundant. That's a dramatic concept. Now, science doesn't require there not to be a God, but as Steve Weinberg said, it makes it possible to have a universe without one.
Just by having information about the molecules, you could create order from disorder.
And in fact, it helps point unambiguously to the possibility that the universe arose from nothing.
So our current state of knowledge of the universe based on scientific theories is that we began about 14 billion years ago out of nothing.
What is the nothing?
And the The dominant energy in the universe resides in empty space, and that's changed everything.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not.
Let me tell you a story. The first story my father told me, and the first story that I told each of you. In the beginning, there was nothing.
Science doesn't require there not to be a God, but as Steve Weinberg said, it makes it possible to have a universe without one. And that's a central possibility which makes our current understanding of the universe totally different than it's been for the last 2,000 years.
'20th century science, embarrassingly, has confirmed the biblical view, because the great discovery in cosmology is that the experts have agreed that the universe had a beginning, and they call it a singularity. You see, the whole Big Bang idea really is, first there was nothing, and then it exploded.
It took 14 billion years of cosmic evolution to create you and me.
Now you might think to yourself, I know that's not true because I see stuff out there that's not random. In other words, I see trees and cars and DNA, and I know these things have a high amount of order.
I am a warrior.
Brave warrior. Then fight for nothing.
But I can't! I can't get beyond the boundaries of Fantasia. What's so funny about that?
Fantasia has no boundaries.
You know, I think a lot of times people get locked into a way of thinking. Because you see, we don't just, the evidence doesn't just speak for itself, does it? It always requires interpretation.
Foolish boy. Don't you know anything about Fantasia? It's the world of human fantasy.
But if the mathematics is based on false or unrealistic concepts, or applied inappropriately, the interpretation will not reflect reality. The interpretation will not reflect reality.
Every part, every creature of it, is a piece of the dreams and hopes of mankind. Therefore, it has no boundary.
So, science and imagination. Science is a creative use of imagination.
You can't prove anything with mathematical equations. They merely describe observations in a way that might provide new information and insights.
Science is creative. It isn't just plugging numbers in. You have to think about, well, why are you doing this? What's the next step? Where is your imagination going to take you?
But if the mathematics is based on false or unrealistic concepts, or applied inappropriately, the interpretation will not reflect reality.
And imagination is more important than knowledge, according to no less than Einstein.
It has no boundary.
So imagining what's going on in the universe around us.
We can contemplate what the universe would be like if there were 4 spatial dimensions in one time dimension. Or, in the case of string theory, 9 spatial dimensions in one time dimension. And while we're at it, it's not even too hard to conceive that there might be 2 dimensions of time. But I don't even have enough of one time dimension to explain that now.
Mathematical theorists aren't scientists, but players of mind games.
It's the world of human fantasy.
Quantum mechanics, combined with relativity, allows something to come from nothing, allows something to come from nothing, allows something to come from nothing.
What is the nothing?
It's the emptiness that's left. It is like a despair, destroying this world.
In fact, nothing is unstable.
Question for Richard Dawkins. The Big Bangers believe that once there was nothing, then suddenly, poof, the universe was created from a Big Bang. If I have nothing in the palm of my hand, close my fingers, speak the word bang, then open my fingers again, still I find there is nothing there. I ask you to explain to us in layman's terms how it is that something as enormous as the universes came from nothing.
Richard Dawkins.
Well, obviously you're not a physicist, and nor... and nor am I, and I am delighted to say that during my time in Australia I shall be having a number of conversations, public conversations, with my colleague Lawrence Krauss. It's a matter, you can quickly respond to that. You can dispute exactly what's meant by nothing, but whatever it is, it's very, very simple. And why is that funny?
Well, I think it's a bit funny to be trying to define nothing.
Let no man deceive himself. If any man among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool, that he may be wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. For it is written, He taketh the wise in their own craftiness. And again, the Lord knoweth the thoughts of the wise, that they are vain.
When you think about nothing, you have to be a little more careful than you normally are, because in fact nothing is a physical concept, because it's the absence of something, and something is a physical concept.
Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world? Hath not God made foolish the wisdom of this world?
And what we've learned over the last 100 years is that nothing is much more complicated than we would have imagined otherwise.
There have been various ideas, but for me, the most attractive is that the universe was spontaneously created out of absolutely nothing.
Before the Big Bang, there was nothing, literally nothing.
Nothing did indeed come from nothing.
For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent.
The universe explodes into existence from absolutely nothing.
All I want to leave you with is the realization that the universe is an engagingly reorganized form of nothing.
And will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. And will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent.
So now you've got no particles, no radiation, no space, no time. That sounds like nothing.
And that speculative acausal events are capable of seeing it come into being without intervention.
So there's no pre-existing fundamental law. Anything that can happen does happen. And therefore you got no laws, no space, no time, no particles, no radiation. That's a pretty good definition of nothing.
Therefore, it It has no boundary.
Science is a creative use of imagination.
It explains how the universe was created out of nothing in the Big Bang.
No God was needed to make the universe, or even to make it happen. My argument diminishes the role of a creator God to zero.
If one can force oneself to believe in the power of chance, then one has embraced irrationality, and anything at all can be made true.
Physicist Wal Thornhill continues his discussion of the growing confusion in theoretical physics. While sensational news headlines sometimes laud definitive science breakthroughs, such as the supposed discovery of the so-called God particle, in reality, more and more scientists are warning that physics and cosmology have reached a state of crisis. The depth of this crisis was summarized in a recent speech by Dr. Neil Turok, the director of the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics. Dr. Turok states, "Theoretical physics is at a crossroads right now. In a sense, we've entered a very deep crisis. If you ask most theorists working on particle physics, they're in a state of confusion. The extensions of the Standard Model, like grand unified theories, were supposed to simplify it, but in fact, they made it more complicated. It's the ultimate catastrophe that theoretical physics has led to this crazy situation where the physicists are utterly confused and seem not to have any predictions at all." This confusion may be evident in popular science media, in which the general public receives speculations ranging from the bizarre to the nonsensical.
Now, this prediction is from theorists who do not understand why matter has mass. Amazingly, they have a standard model of massless particles. There's no such particle. Instead, theorists conjure up a cosmic treacle of Higgs particles to produce the effect of mass in other subatomic particles.
Because I see stuff out there that's not random. In other words, I see trees and cars and DNA, and I know these things have a high amount of order.
But what is information? Well, it seems to be fundamentally about order.
So where is this new information coming from?
There was a creator that made all living things. So when we look at genetics, we find reflected in genetic information and the science of genetics the actual events of our origins. For instance, we know that the genetic instructions that we find in our DNA represent information, and that information, in fact, only comes from a mind, only comes from a mind.
So where is this new information coming from?
Only comes from a mind.
As discussed previously, chance amounts to nothingness.
Random, accidental processes cannot lead to information. In fact, Professor Paul Davies says this: there is no known law of physics able to create information from nothing. So the genetic code, the fact that it exists, is exactly consistent with the statement that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Because you see, the universe has a beginning and therefore requires a cause. The energy in the universe has a beginning and therefore requires a cause. And people say, well, you know, okay, fine, God made the universe, but then who made God? You see, God is eternal.
Now unto the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only wise God, be honor and glory forever and ever.
God doesn't have a beginning and therefore doesn't require a cause. And that may be a little hard to grasp, but there's nothing irrational about an eternal being. There is something irrational about something popping into existence from nothing, because that violates causality.
Out of nothing, nothing comes. So where did the universe come from?
Lift up your eyes on high, and behold who hath created these things.
Why does the universe exist instead of just nothing? Whatever begins to exist
has a cause.
I am the first, and I am the last, and beside me there is no God. And who, as I, shall call and shall declare and set it in order for me, since I appointed the ancient people, and the things that are coming and shall come, let them shew unto them.
2. The universe began to exist.
Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare, if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof?
3. Therefore, the universe has a cause.
The Lord by wisdom hath founded the earth, by understanding hath he established the heavens. By his knowledge the depths are broken up, and the clouds drop down the dew.
Now, from the very nature of the case, as the cause of space and time, this cause must be an uncaused, changeless, timeless, and immaterial being of unimaginable power, which created the universe.
This shall be written for the generation to come, and the people which shall be created shall praise the Lord. Thy years are throughout all generations. Of old hast thou laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of thy hands.
It must be timeless, and therefore changeless, because it created time.
And swear by him that liveth for ever and ever, who created heaven, and the things that therein are, and the earth, and the things that therein are, and the sea, and the things which are therein, that there should be time no longer, that there should be time no longer, time no longer.
Because it also created space. It must transcend space as well, and therefore be immaterial, not physical.
But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth.
Today, let me give you the evolutionary formula to make a universe. Start with some nothing, add to that some more nothing, then let's add some time. Let's add some more time. We've got it. It's a perfectly balanced universe. Look at that sun, moon, stars, planets. Everything's orbiting in perfect balance and order. You know, evolutionists theorize that this formula can enable everything to make itself, even people, with the exception of complicated man-made things like a microscope or a toothpick. But everything else about us in nature is the result of random chance and time. You don't even need raw materials. Those will make themselves.
Hubert Yockey said in his book, 1992 by Cambridge University Press, Information Theory and Molecular Biology on page 284, the belief that life on Earth arose spontaneously from non-living matter is simply a matter of faith in the strict reductionism and is based entirely on ideology, not on science.
The laws of physics are balanced on a razor's edge for life to occur.
Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? The ordinances of heaven, the ordinances of heaven.
Hubert Yockey is not a Christian. He is not a creationist. He says he's an agnostic in his writings.
If you didn't have the strong nuclear force, there would be nothing to hold protons and neutrons together in the nucleus. And so you wouldn't have any atoms, so no chemistry. If you didn't have the electromagnetic force, you would have no bonding between chemicals. You would have no light.
Where is the way where light dwelleth? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof? The rain a father? Or who hath begotten the drops of dew? Out of whose womb came the ice? And the hoary frost of heaven? Who hath gendered it?
Life also hinges on the precise strengths and relative values of many different physical constants.
The ordinances of heaven, the ordinances of heaven.
Sir Frederick Hoyle, in Nature, Volume 294, said this. He said, the likelihood of the formation of life from inanimate matter is 1 to a number with 40,000 noughts, that is, zeros in British after it. It is enough to bury Darwin and the whole theory of evolution. If the beginnings of life were not random, they must therefore have been the product of purposeful intelligence.
Chapters of the book of Genesis, describe or give an historic record of what God actually did when he created the heavens and the earth.
We always look at evidence. We have a way of thinking about things, and when we look at the evidence, we interpret that evidence according to our worldview. And I think that people who believe in the Big Bang, they're used to thinking that way, and so when they look at the evidence, they automatically interpret it as being the result of the Big Bang.
Imagine my laptop computer here accidentally forming itself. You know, it's got some complicated parts. It's got a keyboard, a motherboard, a screen, a battery, hard drive, and so on. I mean, it's preposterous,
ridiculous,
isn't it?
yeah.
But let's assume that it actually did, and that all these hardware pieces just accidentally came together.
Okay.
It's still useless because it won't work without an operating system. You see, it's got to have software. So Paul Davies goes on and says, how did stupid atoms spontaneously write their own software? See, that's a very profound question. If you could enlarge a living cell, you would discover a massively complex organism. In fact, Michael Denton, in his book A Theory in Crisis, Evolution rather, A Theory in Crisis, said this: to grasp the reality of life as it has been revealed by molecular biology, we must magnify a cell 1,000 million times until it is 20 kilometres in diameter and resembles a giant airship large enough to cover a great city like London or New York. What we would then see would be an object of unparalleled complexity and adaptive design. We would find ourselves in a world of supreme technology and bewildering complexity.
Wow.
Have you ever asked yourself, who am I?
Proving the existence of God is like proving the existence of someone else's mind. The thing about the mind is I cannot see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, hear it, or detect it with scientific machinery. It's not detectable. Your mind is non-physical. If I attach an EEG to your head and I measure your brain waves, I'm not measuring your mind. I'm measuring the flow of sodium and potassium ions across a cell membrane, which produces an electric current. Your mind is non-physical, just like God. Non-physical, non-detectable. And yet we know that the mind exists. There are many things that are non-physical that exist. Information is a thing that's non-physical, and it exists.
On that NOVA series I was watching last night, they equated the cosmic microwave background with the Big Bang. They said, you're looking at the Big Bang. No, not at all. You're looking at the cosmic microwave background. That it's a result of the Big Bang, that's just an interpretation. And it's one that has a lot of problems, as you've seen here. See, it's very arrogant of us to try and tell God how He created the universe. I mean, and that's what frustrates me with Christians who try to believe the Big Bang, and they say, "Oh, see, God, you didn't get the time scale right here, and you didn't get the order right either. But we can fix it up if we reinterpret it this way." How arrogant is that? To tell our Creator how He did it. Let's let Him tell us how He did it. That's the real key, isn't it?